Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 5, 2023 Glendale Water and Power Commission. Why don't we go ahead and get started with the agenda and roll call?
Item 1, roll call. Commissioner Fay? Here. Commissioner Kadikian?
Here.
Commissioner Lowry?
Here.
Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
President Jasmadarian?
Here. Okay, let's move on to the consent items, which is the approval of the May 1, 2023 meeting minutes.
Item number 2, approval of the May 1st, 2023 minutes.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
I have, and I move if I have no comments. And I'm ready to move if nobody else has comments.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Item number 3.
Pardon?
Item number 3.
We have to do roll call.
Oh. Commissioner Fay? Aye. Commissioner Kadikian?
Yes.
Commissioner Lowry?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
President Jasmadarian?
Aye. Okay, item number 3.
Item number 3, GWP Commission staff comments.
Okay, why don't we start with Commissioner Fay?
Thank you. Just wanted to mention a couple things I saw in the news since our last meeting that I thought were pretty relevant impacts of climate change that are going to definitely come home to roost for us as well. The heat forecast, news that the next 5 years are likely to be the 5 hottest years ever on Earth, and I think that's going to be germane to our discussion of this summer's readiness for the heat that we'll face and the impact on our electric grid. And then in Phoenix, Arizona, they're going to stop development and construction permit approvals in certain communities due to a lack of groundwater. So it's interesting to see just how relevant the discussions we're having here and the work that all of us here at Glendale Water and Power are doing in the face of climate change, and that other communities are facing these impacts. So thank you very much.
I have no comments. Thank you.
I have no comments. No comments.
And I don't have comments, so we'll move on to, staff comments.
I don't have any comments. We're in the middle of budget season, so we're knee-deep in budget, so I haven't been able to read anything, so no comments.
So we'll move on to item 4.
Item number 4, reports. Item 4A, customer service update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Crystal Onate, Customer Service Utility Supervisor for the Contact and Payment Center. Today, I will be presenting a recap of the financial assistance fundings we have received post-COVID-19, which will be covered in the first 2 slides. Resuming disconnections and late fees, customer services statistics, and an overview of our utility bill for the benefit of our customers. The state-funded assistance programs aided both electric and water customers during the COVID-19 pandemic. For electric, the state offered the California Arrearage Payment Program, which was covered in 2 phases. The first phase covered arrearages from March 4th, 2020 through June 15, 2021 for both residential and commercial customers. The second phase covered assistance for residential active customers with arrearages from June 16, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. Over 9,000 customers received credits totaling over $9 million. For water customers, the state offered two programs. First was the California Water and Water Waste Arrearage Payment Program. This program covered arrearages from March 4th, 2020 through June 15, 2021. 6,000 customers received credits for over $1 million. On the slide, we did give you a breakdown of what credits were received for water and what was received for wastewater. The second program is the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. This program helps residential customers with water and wastewater charges. Although there was minimal participation, we did receive a little bit over $17,000. The program ends August 31st, 2023. For electric and water customers, there was the California Rent Relief Program. The program assisted both renters and landlords. It was open from April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2022. A total of 1,132 customers received assistance for over $994,000. Back on Track was a program offered by GWP from July 2021 through August 31st, 2021. The reason the span of time was so short is because we learned that the state funding cap and CWAP were on their way. The program assisted both electric and residential customers. 540 customers received assistance for a total of over $491,000. The last financial program is through the Low Income Home Energy Assistance, or HEAP, otherwise known. Though it is an ongoing state program during the COVID-19 qualifying period of March 2020 through December 2021, 2,170 customers received assistance for over $855,000. For the time frame of January 2022 through March 2023, an additional 1,407 customers received assistance for over $750,000. As I stated, this program continues to help low-income customers. It has been of great assistance to those customers whose accounts have been disconnected for non-payment. This chart reflects the positive impact the funding has had on the total arrears within the qualifying period, which decreased by 61%. In total, we have received over $9 million in funding. GWP has resumed the charging of late fees effective December the 1st, 2022. We started disconnecting utility accounts for both residential and commercial customers effective January 9th. A total of 1,346 accounts have been disconnected through the third quarter. The process has assisted us in collecting on delinquent accounts, some which had not paid over 3 years. As you can see on the chart, 98% of disconnected customers responded within 24 hours, or either paid in full or made a partial payment with payment arrangements. Now for our stats. For the first 3 quarters, we handled 95% of all of our incoming customer calls. Our service level was 76.3%. The average talk time was a little over 4 minutes, which is the average time we stayed on the phone assisting a customer. Our average queue time, which reflects the time a customer was waiting in queue to be assisted, is 50 seconds, as I said. Our total walk-in customers was 28,718. For our web contacts, we have responded to 73% within 48 hours. Our write-off to revenue is at 0.27%. We have resumed sending closed delinquent accounts to our collections agency effective January 1st. As you can see, there is definitely a decrease in comparison to last year. This is our call performance. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we have answered 95% of our incoming customer calls for the first 3 quarters. I do want to point out that the green bars represent the calls answered. The aging receivables for both electric and water in these 2 next slides will show that most of our revenue continues to be received within the first 30 days. Same as prior to the pandemic. So this is our slide for electric. And this is for water. I apologize if the font's a little small on this utility bill. For the utility bill, commercial accounts are typically billed monthly. Residential and small business are billed bi-monthly. For this presentation, I will be reviewing a residential account for an apartment unit, which is being billed for electric only. As these types of dwellings, the property owner typically pays for the water. Utility bills are 2 pages. The top right portion of the bill contains the account holder name, account number, and billing information. Under account summary, you will see the previous balance of the last bill followed by the last payment received. In the balance forward section, if there is an outstanding balance being carried over from the previous bill, that amount would be reflected there. The current charges, which I can point to that is here, are the charges associated with the new bill. The second page contains a full breakdown of all of those charges. So for our example today, this customer, we can see that the customer was billed $132.07. Sorry. A little temperamental. Sorry. So that was 132.07. The total balance due is the combination of the current charges and any outstanding balance carried over from the previous bill. In this case, we don't have a balance being carried over by this customer. The last portion of the bill is the stub that the customer may use to mail in their payment or come into the office with their payment. Next is the breakdown. On this second page, we have the customer's information again on the right-hand side of the bill. In the account details section, we have the service type, the meter number, the rate the customer will be charged on, the number of days, and the total electric usage, which in this case is 567 kilowatts. We take, how we come up with that is we take the prior meter reading and the current meter reading, and we subtract that to get the actual usage. On the first page, I told you that the total electric charge for this customer was $132.07. Now let's take a look how we came up with that amount. The first charge is the customer charge. This is the cost of meter reading support and account maintenance. It is applied on a per meter basis. The energy charge is the actual cost of energy consumption based on the usage. Some of our rates are calculated in tiers based on usage. Customers may be billed across 3 tiers. In this case, this customer will only fall on the first tier. And how we calculate that is we take the first 10 kilowatts times the number of days in the billing period times the rate. The energy cost adjustment charge is a charge to adjust for the variations from the projected cost of fuel and purchase power. The way we calculate that is we take the usage times the rate. The electric regulatory adjustment charge is calculated in the same way with the usage times the rate. The electric revenue decoupling charge, that's the charge that we adjust for the differences between the actual and projected sales volumes. Again, we take the usage time and we times that by the rate to get that figure. Our public benefits charge, that is 3.6% of the total electric charge. And then with there, we also have the electric total is the actual total for the 13207 of all of the components of that electric summation. Our rates are listed on our website at glendalewaterandpower.com. They're also provided to customers upon request. Services by other city departments, these are standard fees with charge to all electric meters. Just to go over one here, the hazardous waste is a fee associated with the cost of collecting, recycling, treatment, and disposing of household and commercial hazardous waste. That is a flat charge currently of 55 cents per month. And then there is the sewer operating cost, and then any associated taxes, which we have the city's utility tax and the state surcharge tax. The total charges for all the charges listed here is for everything above. Any late charges would also be listed in that amount. At the bottom of each bill, we do provide customers with the graphing of their usage for the last 12 months. In this case, our customer has only been with us for 6 months. The last portion I want to mention is the back of the bill. It provides customers with the terms and definitions, policies on delinquent bills, and account responsibility. One of the other things that we do have on the back of the bill is when a bill is due, which is due 19 days from the date of billing. We also inform the customer of when a late charge will be placed on their account, which is at the 38th day, and it gives any information pertaining to disconnections and charging a deposit if an account is disconnected for non-payment. This concludes my presentation. Is there any questions?
Yeah, covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah.
What does it actually work like? I mean, this disconnection process. So people haven't been paying their bills. We let them know. They send them past due notices. They get bills with big red letters. They don't do anything, and we turn off the water, and they call immediately, and they find the money to pay. Is that? I mean, how does it
Pretty
actually
much.
work?
So we release the bill, right? The bill is due, let's say in this particular case, the bill was released May 10th. That bill is due 19 days from that date of billing, which in this case is May 30th. On day 23, the customer receives a friendly reminder notice saying, hey, you need to pay your bill. After that, on the 38th day, if it's not paid by that point, if it's not paid by that point, a final notice for disconnection is sent, and that is attached with a late charge, and that notice is a red notice. After that, it is...
What's the yield or response rate on people who get that late fee, they get the red notice, and they think, oh, I really have to take this seriously? Does that have a big impact?
Yes, that's how it happens. I mean, for a while, I think it was a learning curve for our customers because we hadn't been disconnecting for 3 years, and not a lot of them were paying attention at first. But I think once we started doing the first wave of interrupting their electric service, which is what we try to aim for first, is we always disconnect electric. And if there is no electric, then obviously the water. I think that got a lot of customers' attention. And then our call volume definitely started to increase at that point with requests on payment arrangements as to where before we were not getting as many payment arrangement requests. Today, we are basically at pre-COVID levels.
So what's the kind of funnel if we have the total population of 100% of customers who are late enough to be in this position? You send them the red notice. What percentage of them respond and pay or make a payment arrangement, and what percent kind of continue on and actually have to get to a shutoff?
I don't have that number. I
think that would be interesting to track
Yeah.
and see how that changes, because I think what jumps out to me is like, we can't get 98% of people to do anything, right?
Right.
Unless we turn off their electricity.
Right.
So like clearly there's a big stick there, and I think we need to use it carefully, but also we need to use it if, customers are behind. So I think that's really important. I haven't seen any statistics here where we can get 98% compliance, even giving money away to people for free. Our incentive programs don't even get that kind of response, right? So clearly this is powerful.
Yeah, I don't have that number as how many are actually paying once they get that disconnect notice. I don't
Okay.
have that number.
I think
But
maybe next time when we have this
yes.
update, we could include that.
For sure, definitely.
If I may, this is a good point. If the residents or the customers are having a difficulty paying their bill, don't wait till you shut off to call customer service. Talk to customer service right away, and they'll arrange some kind of payment schedules to prevent you from getting turned off. When you get turned off, there's other things that start to happen when you get turned off, like reconnection costs and things like that. So please, if anybody has any problems, contact customer service, and customer service will work with you in order for that not to happen.
So it's sufficient to set up a payment arrangement to avoid being cut off, even if you can't come up with the total balance due?
Yes, that is correct.
Do you think most customers understand that? Or do you think they're
I think
afraid
so.
that they don't have the whole past due amount, so they just kind of hide from this or avoid it, or?
No, I think customers are very well aware of that. Also, when they do call in, we do, explain to the customer, you are being given this arrangement, please make sure to honor it, otherwise your service may be interrupted. So if a customer defaults on that payment arrangement, then there is no further warning and the service is disconnected automatically the next business day.
And do people just find out that they go to turn on the lights and they don't come on, or they get a notice on their door? How does that work?
The lights just don't come on.
People figure it out pretty quickly, what
Yes.
happened?
For residential, I'm sorry.
That-
For commercial, we do give a courtesy call.
So we have automatic meters, so those smart meters can be turned on and off remotely. So years ago, there was somebody that was actually going to disconnect, and they would actually flip your main breaker and then lock it. That's not how it happens anymore with these smart meters. We can actually send a signal to that meter to turn it off. So there wouldn't be any home interaction. It would just be turning that meter off.
And likewise, we can turn it on remotely if we get a payment arrangement set up?
Yes.
Okay. I am being told that the final notice response is about 90%.
Okay, so 90% on the final notice, and then of the remaining 10% that continue past that, 98% of that 10% gets it figured out within 24 hours?
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On the statistics, the kind of customer interaction statistics, this is really just for the call center?
Yes.
That's what these figures are?
Yes.
How are we tracking interactions, or what are our KPIs around other kind of customer interactions? Like when customers apply for a permit for their solar system and the turnaround time on that? Who's responsible for that, and how do we think about that more broadly as customer interaction?
For the solar, that's not within my department. That would be over in the marketing section.
Right, that's in engineering. So engineering takes care of that, and that's been a problem for utilities throughout the whole country, especially in California, because with the ADUs and the increase in solar, it is an issue, and we're working on trying to reduce the timing of that issue.
I think it would be great if we can, and this could be a topic for a future meeting, think about our customer experience globally. So we have some customer segments that call the call center because they get their power cut off. We have some customers who call us to get help with their permits for solar. We have other customers who are businesses. If we kind of think about all of them and what the different interactions and touch points they have with GWP, because I think, by measuring the folks who call the call center, we're just seeing one slice of our population, and we might be over-focusing on one particular group while some other group feels like they're getting really bad customer service. So I think that would be good. And I understand that might be in different departments or different functions, but maybe we can pull all that together and kind of see the whole customer picture.
Noted.
Anyone else have questions about these slides so far? I have a couple on the utility bills, but happy to.
You said there was some customers that did not pay for like 3 years. Were there a lot of them?
Yes, I don't have the exact figure. I mean, there was,
It wasn't like one
Quite
or
a-
two. There were.
no, yeah, it was more than, I would say more than 50 accounts. I don't have the exact number with
But
me.
these people did not pay their bill for 3 years, but 90% of them found the money as soon as the lights went off.
Yes, yes. And I think some of it might have been because the customer didn't have the money, or others just decided they weren't going to open the utility bill
Or made arrangements, right?
or made payment arrangements.
They don't
That-
necessarily have to hold the whole money.
Correct. But if they were disconnected because of the 3 years, because they did not attempt to make any payments. Those customers that were in a particular tight spot, we did work with them as much as possible with payment arrangements if they reached out to GWP. The ones that I'm talking about are those that made no attempt to pay us whatsoever or make any arrangements with us.
Right. And the people that did make arrangements, say say they're like $800, they have $800 in accumulated bills. What would typically be the arrangements made? Is it made over a year, or how do you typically structure these
Well,
payment schedules?
for those that received any of the funding, such as CAP or CWAP, they were given up to 1 full year of payment arrangements. That was based on the program policy that once they got the funding, that we had to give them up to 1 year arrangements. For customers that did not qualify for the any of the funding, where they just were not able to pay the bill, then we worked with them with having to pay a partial payment up front, and then try to give them in a reasonable amount of time to pay the bill. I mean, sometimes we did it for 5 months or 6 months, and try to work with the customer at that point. Also referring them to the Home Energy Assistance Program, which really, really has played key, even for those customers that did not pay us. They were able to assist many of those.
Well, thanks for your work on this. I'm sure over during the pandemic, this was really, really critical to a lot of people, and really appreciate, all the, how you worked with all the people. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
On slide 9, the service statistics, for those rows that were not achieving the target, and there's a couple of them, is there like a corrective action plan, or is there something that's reflected in our budget requests? We need more people to get our response time down, or how do we go about solving that so we are back within our target?
So with our average talk time, the goal that we did not meet there, part of that was, yes, we just hired 5 new employees. So part of that problem was that we were in the training phase of that.
And new employees aren't as efficient in getting through these calls
Correct.
quickly?
Correct. That's part of it. The other part is, once we introduced this connection of service, the first wave of customers where it was a little bit challenging to have to go back to that old rhythm of disconnecting customers and explaining those policies. It was a bit of a learning curve for all staff, just to not have done it for so long and then having to resume it. As for the our web contacts, yeah, definitely that was affected during us recruiting to fill positions. And I'm hoping, I know for a fact that it'll get better in this next quarter. I've already seen the numbers. I kind of looked at it today, and that percentage is definitely higher. It's up at about 94% today.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, I think those kind of stories and that narrative about what's going on within our business is, at least to me, much more interesting and helpful than just seeing the chart full of numbers. So I think when you go through this next time, maybe you can come with some of the story behind the numbers of why are these things out of range? Why has this gone up or down? That would be much more helpful.
Okay, pointed. Noted.
For the bill, who designed our utility bill? Or who comes up with like the graphic design of these things?
Well,
I mean, has it changed in the last 50 years, or?
It has not changed. We are currently looking at the reformatting of the bill and cleaning it up in a lot of aspects so that it's more clearer to the customer. That's in progress now. I'm hoping maybe by the end of the year. Before that.
Is that something where we like hire a consultant who's an expert in designing utility bills, or how does that work? How do we go about doing that?
Well, we work with our printing vendor to format what we can change on the existing contract that we have with them. So I know that we're moving around many of the fields.
Do we know what the best practice is? Like, is there a utility, water, electric, cable, gas, anywhere that has like a really good bill that customers really like?
A zero bill.
likes
A zero
I mean,
bill.
no one ever likes getting the bill, but, you can think about when there's a lot of these things we have to interact with. There's like design documents, and think about what
Right.
boarding passes on airplanes used to look like, even 10 years ago. It was just barcodes and, monospaced font. And then, I don't remember which airline was first, but they introduced the idea of different font sizes, right? And the information you actually care about is in bigger font, and it's right in the middle. And all of a sudden, these really anodyne documents became much more friendly, and then ultimately they all became passes on our phone. Seems like maybe there's an opportunity here, and if we're going to make a change, let's not just box ourselves into what does the printing press able to accommodate, but what would a more effective utility bill actually look like, right? And if that means maybe we need to hire a graphic designer, or think a little bit broader about that, or do a study of, let's see what sample bills look like from 100 different utilities and see who has one that's good. I think there's probably something we can do there that's better.
Yeah, definitely. With the task force we have now looking at this, we are taking in a lot of the customer feedback we've gotten throughout the years. So yeah, and definitely, I think you made a very valid point.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had one question. So how do we set this average talk time target of 3.5 minutes? Because I know some people who talk a lot and you can't get them off the phone. So how is that set? Who set it?
It's the call center standard. It's the business standard. And you're right. We get people that talk a lot, and the way we train our staff is to just wait till the customer breathes and interject with a question. Definitely to stick to topic, offer the customer what we do have available for them. But then there's sometimes we get that long-winded customer, and we just have to assist them the best we can.
I mean, it's good to have a target, but I don't think it's a matrix that we should strive to kind of stay below that, because especially for elderly who do not understand, who have difficulty communicating, we don't want to get customer service to trying to cut them off, even though sometimes it's necessary. But again, the matrix is good number, but if we exceed it, I'm not losing sleep over it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and we don't either. I mean, if we have the little old lady over the phone, we definitely do not rush her off the phone. We assist her. We listen to all of the points she has to make with us. And we're not really, penalizing that at all.
Mark?
Thank you. Couple of items. I wanted to acknowledge customer service and all the work that they've done, especially with the doing the turn-offs now through COVID. They've done an outstanding job, and you couldn't pay me to do that job, because when they call, it's always complaining, and they're doing a great job of doing what they do. We many times get emails from customers complimenting them for the patience and the understanding that they've had. So they don't usually get kudos, but this is a good opportunity for me to give that to them. Another one is the GWP bill, because I hear this all the time. My GWP bill is so high. Well, the GWP bill is 2 months typically of water and electric, hazardous waste, sewer, and services by other departments. So it's additive. So it's not just a GWP bill, although GWP is sending it out. There's other things associated with that bill. So I'd like to make sure that people are aware of that.
Yes, that is true, because we're also billing the hazardous waste, the sewer operating costs as well.
We
I mean,
have.
we're essentially the billing department for the city, right?
That's correct.
So this might be part of the bill design is, instead of calling it the GWP bill, it's the City of Glendale bill, and GWP's one line item, right? Or electric is a line item, and water is a line item, and
Right.
maybe instead of it being tiny print at the bottom, it's a picture of a trash truck with a, how much you're paying for trash next to it, those kinds of things. So I think people misunderstand that a lot, and you compare to what are you paying in Edison? Well, they get billed once a month, right? So the bill is lower, but it's actually higher because of,
Correct. We'll take that
communication.
into consideration, and we'll look at actually trying to make the bill easier to understand. And as far as the people that were getting turned off, in the financial assistance, we got over $9 million in financial assistance. And what does that mean? That means that people weren't paying their bill, and the state was helping GWP in the sum of $9 million to make them current. So they were current at one time, and then they were going delinquent again until we started to do the turnoffs.
Yeah.
Mark, perhaps you can explain why. I mean, I know the usage goes up significantly in the summer, but it seems the rates go up too with it. Is that true, or how does that work?
Well, for the one piece is we do have our rates, we have the seasonal rates. So in the summertime of July through the end of October, we do have the higher tier,
Okay.
as opposed to our winter tier, which is November 1st through the end of June.
Okay. Does it have anything to do with buying power on the market too?
Oh, yes, it's definitely power procurement. So you could see sometimes when we had that heat wave last summer, prices were like $1,500. We can buy in the winter for $30, $40. So there's a huge difference, and that's on a per megawatt basis wholesale. So there's a big difference in pricing, and we're just trying to pass through some of the expenses and have people aware that summertime is more expensive.
Okay. Joel?
Just a quick question on, as we look at, I really appreciate the comments of my colleague about trying to make things friendlier, but for our council, is there any legal ramifications? Are there parameters that a bill must have on it, certain disclosures and certain formatting? Just want to make sure that we're...
President Jasmine, Commission members, Commissioner Peterson, the bill has to be informative as required by the different governing propositions. So the customers need to be informed of, the rate, the amount of usage, of course, and the bill has to provide a means for the customer to contact and ask further questions, which is where our customer service department is so efficient. So the short answer to your question is yes, the bill needs to have a certain amount of information on there. It can't just say, your total is this, and you're just going to have to pay it. If you have any questions, come see us. So it has to have a breakdown.
Sure. So it'd be fair that as we look at revising any of this, that probably legal would get involved to ensure and sign off on it?
Of course, yes, legal will be there to assist us needed.
Okay. And I assume that there's probably some case law that has points where that may inform us on some of this. And unfortunately, I guess one of the expectations might be, just to share with our colleagues, is that as we try to make things more user-friendly, oftentimes regulations and things like case law is a trailing element, and that may be making things somewhat more difficult. I just want to acknowledge that as our customer service people try, that they may have some constraints that are not necessarily intuitive for us.
I don't expect you to have the number right now, but maybe for the next update, it would be interesting to see the percentage of customers who pay their bill in different ways. So, how many are on auto pay, how many log in once a month or every other month and submit a one-time online payment, who shows up with an envelope of cash, who goes to 7-Eleven. I think that's a customer segmentation that would be really informative about who are the different kinds of customers we're serving, and we might want to work with them differently so that may tell us something about, their financial situation or whatever, right? So I think that might be interesting to look at going forward.
Okay, definitely.
And maybe as those change over time, right? If we want to see some target of, it costs us a certain amount of money to process the cash that comes into the customer service window, we want to shift to X% of people paying online or paying auto pay to reduce our transaction costs. How can we incentivize that? Maybe we give people a $5 credit if they switch to paperless billing or auto pay or whatever it is.
Okay. Yeah, right now, you're right, I don't have that figure, but I want to say that majority of our payments are being received online. But next time, definitely we'll bring those numbers with me.
Great, thank you.
I just had one comment regarding the hazardous waste, the 55 cents a month for the hazardous waste. I recently took advantage of that service, and I got a really good deal. I dropped off a bunch of old paint and a bunch of real nasty stuff that I pulled out of my garage, and I was really glad that didn't go in the landfill. And but I would encourage everybody to use that service. It's over on Flower Street, and the people were really knowledgeable and very professional, and I just think it's a real good deal.
Yeah.
With no other comments, we'll move on to the next item.
Item number 4B, local water supply.
At this time, I'd like to have Richard Rule, Water Services Administrator, present.
I don't have the remote. It's all right, if you want to change them. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As we look at our local water supply and possible ways to increase it, let's first take a look at where our water comes from. This is a review for all of you, I think, but 60% of our water is imported from Metropolitan Water District, meaning 40% is produced locally. Of that, 31% comes from the San Fernando Water Basin, which means from the Glendale operable unit wells, and just 4% comes from the Verdugo Basin. Verdugo Basin, of course, is on the northeast side of the mountains there, and San Fernando is on the southwest side. And then 7% of our water use comes from our recycled water supply. But if we drill down a little deeper, both the direct use of imported water and the indirect use of imported water adds up to 95% of our water supply. Meaning, if I go back, really it's just that 4% in the Verdugo Basin that is not either direct or indirect imported water. The recycled water is imported. It's simply being used for a second time after it's been treated. Similarly, in the San Fernando Basin, we have a 20% return flow credit from water that we provide to the San Fernando Basin, which is essentially imported water initially. So the incentive to use less imported water is strong, particularly economically. The expensive imported water currently is around $1,200 per acre foot. Locally produced water, although it's hard to pin down exactly, is about half or a little bit less than half of that cost. Also, imported water is at times not reliable, as we've seen this last couple of years, resulting in Glendale having to reduce their potable water use by at least 20%. The benefits of recycled water are somewhat obvious, but The top one, the environmental benefit, if we import less water from the Sacramento Delta or the Colorado River, that has a significant environmental benefit. There's increased reliability for recycled water. It is essentially drought-proof. All of the different phases limiting use or irrigation use of potable water did not apply to recycled water. If you had recycled water, you could essentially water as much as you want. Sometimes the public's not fully aware of that, but the conservation phases do not apply to recycled water. Maximum beneficial use, if you use water more than one time, of course, you're increasing its beneficial use, which we do for recycled water. It's used domestically initially, inside domestically, and then treated and used a second time as recycled water. If not for that, it would be discharged down the LA River to the ocean, which I would say most people don't consider the highest beneficial use. Glendale, again, this is probably a review, has a long history of recycled water use, initially in 1978, so it's been 45 years. In the 90s and the early aughts, we invested $20 million in the expansion of the recycled water system. We currently use about 2,000 acre feet of recycled water, and we have proposed expansions to bring that up to at least additional 3,500 acre feet. Most of that being used by Pasadena, which I'll get into in a second, and then 400 locally. We have 21 miles of pipeline, 6 pump stations, and about 80 recycled water customers. The Glendale, LA reclamation plant, LAGWARP, as we say, we share the cost of operation by 50% with LA, and we're entitled to 50% of the discharge from that plant. Currently averaged discharge, say 18,000 acre feet, our half would be 9,000 acre feet. Of that, we're using about 2,000, so that leaves 7,000 acre feet recycled water currently being unused, being discharged to the river. So there's plenty of recycled water to use. How do we go about using it? Well, essentially it means expanding our distribution system. If we look at our current distribution pipes in purple, we can see we serve Oakmont Country Club to the north, Shoal Canyon to the east, Grayson Power Plant to the west, and Forest Lawn to the south, along with, 75 other customers. Those large customers we typically call anchor customers, and when you put in a distribution line, ideally you want to have an anchor customer at the end of the line to make that pipeline installation economically feasible. And then you pick up any other customers along the way between the source and the anchor customer at the end. We do have proposed expansions. If you look in the orange, the purple that goes to Shoal is up Glen Oaks Canyon. Currently, there's no pipeline in Chevy Chase Canyon, but there is one proposed to go up to the Chevy Chase Golf Course as an anchor customer. The one in blue is the Hoover Toll Keppel pipeline, which is already installed. Construction is complete. It's unfortunately not been used on site yet, but there's ongoing negotiations to make that happen. The hang-up is the on-site retrofit, which can be extensive to switch over to recycled water use, and that's the case with Glendale Unified School District. Let's see, I'll go back. So, the use of recycled water by Pasadena. I don't want to speak out of turn because they're not here to give their side of the story, but there is an agreement, a 20-year-old agreement that was signed to accommodate the use of recycled water from Glendale to Pasadena. In fact, the infrastructure was put in place and constructed on Glendale side to allow that to happen. It hasn't happened. It was one of Mike DeGhetto's biggest frustrations, I think, and the reasons are varied, but there was a lot of turnover of executive management, or they'd have to apparently start again at the beginning. This all predated my time here, but I've heard the stories. For their part, Pasadena has had their own challenges about building their distribution system. The original plan was to serve the Rose Bowl area and the College of Art and Design area. The stories I've heard are there was a huge outcry from residents around the Rose Bowl not wanting the construction to happen in their neighborhood. An alternate alignment was arrived at, and even that was not satisfactory. So this is an ongoing process, and we hope to meet with actually the new Assistant General Manager at Pasadena to discuss this, to see exactly where they're at. So that is still in the works, but that would be about 3,000 acre-feet to Pasadena. So let's look at our well location. And is it feasible to drill new wells? I should have mentioned earlier, I was going to look at 4 possible ways to increase local water supply. Recycled water was one, drilling new wells is a second. Stormwater capture, and then the 4th one, which I added just recently, but is probably our future, direct potable reuse. And I'll get into all of those. But let's look at well locations. Currently, our wells in the San Fernando Valley, sorry, this is small, but the Glendale operable unit wells number in nine wells. They're on the southwest side there along San Fernando Road. 5 in the northern part, we call those the northern wells, and 4 in the southern wells. The Verdugo Basin wells, there's 4 of them. Wells 3 and 4 along Verdugo Boulevard. Well 6 at the southern end of Oakmont Country Club. And the Foothill well there at the top along Foothill Boulevard between Lauderdale and Dunsmore. Is it possible to drill new wells? Yes, but not in the San Fernando Valley. It wouldn't do us any good, because as we've learned, all of those water rights belong to the city of LA. So we're looking at the Verdugo Basin, and this is a constant search. I can honestly say this has been ongoing for a long time to find new well locations in the Verdugo Basin, because we have unused water rights there. We had what we thought was a perfect location near well 6 at the southern end of the Oakmont Country Club in the SCE right-of-way. And following a year-long negotiation, several back and forth, they finally came down with a hard no permanent structures in the right-of-way, which still baffles me a bit. I think it's a relatively new policy because back in the day I would see all kinds of things in the right-of-way. So we moved on from there. We're currently looking at the Foothill well location, either further rehabbing and enhancing the flow from the existing well, or drilling a new well at that site. There's challenges with each. Cost of a new well at that site would be about $1.2 million. It would pay for itself eventually because of the big disparity between met water and local water. But I know it's a huge investment, and that decision is ongoing right now. We're still gathering more information before making a final decision. Oh, and then stormwater capture. Again, a challenge, certainly in the San Fernando Basin, because we do not own that water, do not have rights to it, so it doesn't make sense for us to capture water there. In the Verdugo Basin, limited space is the problem. Typically, stormwater capture goes into a spreading ground. There is not anywhere in that area where we could put a spreading ground. So stormwater capture is, in my mind, not a no-go, but a challenge. It's interesting, I just read this email today and I wasn't really aware of it. Public Works has a project of permeable alleyways. They're redoing the pavement on a number of alleyways and putting in permeable gutters. So any stormwater that gathers in the gutters, at least a portion of it would infiltrate into the groundwater. This is the kind of thing we may be looking at. We've all heard of green streets. You know, those are expensive projects, but they do allow for infiltration into groundwater. Public Works kind of handles the public right-of-way. I don't know a lot about that project, so I would get more information from them if interested. And I mentioned the foothill well rehab. The last one, direct potable reuse. I don't have a slide, I probably should have, but in my opinion, this is really where our future kind of lies. Direct potable reuse is whereby water from the reclamation, discharge from the reclamation plant is treated to drinking water quality and piped or pumped directly into the existing potable water system. This has been ongoing for a number of years in different locations. The City of LA, along with Metropolitan Water District, is currently in the process of building a huge direct DPR plant in Carson. They have a demonstration project there. They're currently in the environmental review phase and will probably start construction in 2024. The final regulations for DPR are still being written. They should be completed this year. Indirect potable reuse has been ongoing for decades, especially in Orange County, whereby wastewater, or treated wastewater, tertiary water as we call it, is spread into the groundwater and reused, or it is used as a supplement to a raw water supply that then goes to a water treatment plant. Both of those are not really an option for Glendale. But I think we will be looking at DPR in the not too distant future. I think we will all be drinking DPR in some form within 5 years, certainly within 10 years. In my mind, that's where the largest future of water reuse lies, is with DPR. And that's it. Kind of quick. Any questions?
Dr. Fay, Commissioner Fay. Yes, there you go.
Just to seize on that last point about we'll all be drinking DPR. Aren't we already? I mean, where does the wastewater from Las Vegas and other cities that are along the Colorado River, where do they discharge their wastewater once it goes through the treatment plant?
Right.
Into the Colorado River, right?
Right. Well, that would be a form, I mean, the terms are a little confused. That would be a form of indirect potable reuse. Direct potable reuse means the use of treated wastewater without an environmental buffer. So pumped directly into a potable distribution system.
Right.
So.
But as we learned in elementary school with the water cycle, it's all the same water, right? I mean, the environmental buffer is it could evaporate and go into the ocean and we pump it out again, or it goes through a river, or it just goes right into the pipe, but it's all the same water, right?
The reasoning being, I think there is some treatment that happens in that environmental setting, whether it's soil, and supplementing a raw water supply, which would be an example of the Colorado River, I think. I mean, we don't drink the Colorado River water directly, it's treated first, usually by MET, but.
Right. I think the point I'm getting at is there's a public aversion to the concept of treating or drinking treated wastewater, but from a scientific perspective, it's just like drinking any other water, right?
Thank you. Yes, thank you for making that point. Yes, there is a public perception that is and will be a challenge. In Orange County, this was initiated years ago, and the term toilet to tap was being used.
I was
And
trying to avoid that term.
That kind of.
It's too catchy.
That kind of killed it. So we don't use that term anymore. We use direct potable reuse.
Very good. So I'm glad that you mentioned the economic kind of comparison between our different water sources. And it seems like as long as our alternative for incremental water is buying it from Metropolitan at $1,200 an acre foot, there's a lot we could do that would be cost effective here within Glendale that would be cheaper than buying it from Met, right?
Yes, the payback, the ROI is pretty attractive. Yeah.
And is it the right way to think about it, that if we're paying $1,200 per acre foot to Metropolitan, anything we do locally that costs less than $1,200 an acre foot is therefore a good investment?
Well, yeah, in a sense, I mean, you don't want your payback period to be too long. You know, you don't want it to be 100 years, even 20 years. The rule of thumb I always use is 10 years. If your payback period is 10 years or less, it's a go, you know, but people have different opinions on that.
So I think one thing that would be really interesting to further this discussion about what are good local projects to do is kind of benchmark them all against what we would pay for an equivalent amount of water from Metropolitan, right? So maybe next time we come up with this discussion, if we're looking at individual projects to consider, whether it's direct potable reuse plant or expanding a well or building a new well or, you know, buying right of way in order to build a new well, if we could, is it reasonable to think about it in those economic terms of what is the resulting cost per acre foot of water we would generate?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's exactly what we're doing with Foothill Well. That 1.2 million, what is the payback period? I've calculated different things, but it could be as little. It depends on how much that well produces, which is an unknown. You never know until the well's complete, essentially. So it's been as little as 4 years or 5 years. So that's a great investment. You weigh that against trying to squeeze as much as you can out of the existing well, albeit at a lower flow, and you kind of weigh the pros and cons of that. That's exactly where we're at right now. But any project, yeah, I would look at the payback period based on local cost versus Met cost. Yeah.
And the Met cost has been going up in the last 10 years,
Exactly,
right?
Yes, I should have said 1,200 going up, yes. And it often, I couldn't say often, sometimes increases more than the rate of inflation.
Does Met publish projections for their water, or can we infer that from their capital planning?
I don't know.
Because it seems like if we're if we're modeling a cost effectiveness of a local investment, today's price of Met water is not even the relevant figure, right? It's
correct.
the next 10 years of Met water, or the life of the project, right?
I've always assumed the rate of inflation, but Nina's nodding her head. They do have projections, yes.
Yes, they have 10-year projections, and they'll update it every year with each new rate cycle, which is every 2 years.
So it seems like we have all the information available to us to try to make these assessments of which projects are essentially good investments of public funds.
Yes, except there are unknowns like what production will be for a well you drill. You know. That's a big one.
And really, it sounds like the Verdugo Basin is the area where we need to focus, right? Because anything elsewhere in the city, the water either goes somewhere where we can't recapture it, or it goes into LA's water rights.
Right.
So if we had a map of the city and we drew a line of where water would infiltrate into the Verdugo Basin, that's kind of where we'd want to focus our efforts.
Well, it's all one basin. I mean, and people make their careers out of trying to predict good locations for wells. And we have consultants that help us. But the challenge, I had it for stormwater, but for wells also limited space. I mean, the city doesn't own property. Foothill Well lot is owned, but typically they don't own property that would be suitable for a well location, the footprint of a well. So you're looking at getting easements from other property owners.
How big is a well?
Well, the wellhead itself is small, typically, depends on the well, 100 square feet. Adjacent to it, you're going to have a chlorination building typically, and another building for your electrical panels. So I couldn't give you a square foot number, but
It's not the kind of thing
not that big.
people
not
would
that-
want to host in their backyard for a fee or something.
I hadn't thought of that. No.
Hey, we got customers generating electricity for us, and they're on their rooftops. So,
We'll give them, we'll incentivize that.
well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm driving at. Is it seems like you have the economic situation, which would really favor exploiting the Verdugo Basin as much as we can, in a sustainable way. And we have a defined geography. Is there a version we draw a circle on a map and saying anyone who can figure out a way to get water out of this aquifer will pay you a certain amount of money, right? Or put out an open call for projects and see who comes up with new ideas for this.
Yes, that's an interesting idea. Thank you. Of course, we'd have to have access to the well, which is a challenge even for our existing wells, but
Okay, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
helping us focus because, Glendale's a big city and it sounds like drilling a well on this side of town or that side of town makes a big difference about whether it's useful or a good investment or not, so. With the public works projects that are aiming to capture stormwater, do they factor in the water basins at all in their process, or are they really looking at pollutant loads and stormwater pollution offsets?
that's a good question. I think the one I just looked at was in the Verdugo, but I couldn't say for certain.
That might be an opportunity, and I know these are different departments, so maybe we need to get some higher level of coordination, but it seems like that's kind of a no-brainer. If Public Works is gonna spend a certain amount of money on stormwater capture, and we would rather it's on this side of the street versus that side of the street,
Help us and not LA, yes.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it seems like that would be good for the city of Glendale as a whole to make sure that both hands are talking to each other, so.
Right.
So is there a process for that at this point, or do we have any kind of working group with Public Works on that kind of thing, or?
I'll answer that question. We're always in communication with Public Works for building our fiber system by changing out the power poles or actually digging the streets up to put new water pipes in. So we're always conversing with Public Works. So this will just be another one.
Okay, yeah, I think it would be good to add to that agenda, because this seems like there's an opportunity for two different city entities that are both, spending city money to try to do it in a way that's, accretive to each other, so. All right.
Thank you. Two questions. One is with regard to jurisdiction. I know that when I was with Glendale Community College, we struggled with putting in new recycled water, particularly into our buildings and so forth, because there seemed to be overlapping jurisdictions and contradictory jurisdictions between county and the city. We felt that we were subject to the city. We didn't quite understand why the county was coming in. And is this something that you all can help resolve? Because it seems to be an impediment for entities who might otherwise put in wastewater systems.
Well, this question comes up a lot since Glendale does not have their own health department. Yes, on-site recycled water use falls under the jurisdiction of the county health. So Glendale puts in the distribution pipe, puts in the meter, puts in the connection point, but the on-site work would be under the jurisdiction of county health, and they come out and do their inspections, ensure there's no cross connections. They have their own protocol. I don't know how to get around that. But
Yeah, and that would be great if there was a clear line of demarcation. If you said up to this point, city, what they say goes. After this point, county, what they say goes. What happens is county comes in after city said okay and says, that's not okay. you need to redo all the whole kind of point, how you got it to the campus, how you're going to go ahead and do it. And we're like, well, but the city, right here, the permit, it says we can. And they go, well, we, the county, we say they can't.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that specific example. The on-site worker would be county health. I mean, we can assist,
'cause
but
But what it was, they were talking about the cross-connect to the city portion. And what they were arguing was 2 points. One was that they had the health part, but that ultimately that the city also got the recycled water from county. Is that true?
We get the recycled water from Ladworp, and we're 50% partners with Los Angeles, so that's our water. I mean, it's not like we're taking water from a
Oh,
county
they were saying
entity.
that's why they had jurisdiction on the upstream portion when we're trying to do the interconnect, but.
no, we distribute, we serve our water. We have a right to
It
it.
just may be something that, if you might have conversations with county to say, how can we serve our joint customers better so that we don't disincentivize them to not put this in because it's too onerous?
Yeah.
Second question, this is really maybe for council, is does it, $1,200 an acre foot for, that's what we're paying to municipal, is that what it costs them?
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying, my sense is they make a profit. Correct? No? They don't? So they're just passing through at their cost? So how is it that our cost, if we did our own water, is so much cheaper?
It's the distribution system that you're actually paying for. Metropolitan's distribution system is much larger, so they're also taking water from the State Water Project. It's coming from Northern California. It's significantly longer. Colorado River Aqueduct as well. All of those distribution costs are significantly more than a city.
But it's also spread over a much larger base, so I'm just trying to understand. I guess what I wanted to make the point is, you know, under the California State Constitution, we have something called intergovernmental fiscal immunity, meaning that one government, a municipality or a county, cannot go ahead and charge another government municipality any tax. A tax is basically any fee or charge that is not a good or service that's been rendered. In other words, a city is not in the business of trying to make money off of another city. Obviously, if we are buying water, we can get it. I'm just wondering if we couldn't potentially challenge the pricing on some legal grounds. If we can just save money, I mean, you're talking about investing all sorts of money into potentially new wells and all these kind of things, big upfront capital investments. Maybe it's worthwhile investing a little bit into a legal challenge and seeing if we can't get the costs down.
I think, well, I imagine that road has already been explored, but I will see what I can find out, but I'm not hopeful at all for that.
I'm just trying to understand on what basis are they charging us that amount? And is that comparable then to, you know, any other customer that they have? And if there's a difference, if we're paying a premium, then on what basis is that? Is that premium actually a good or service we're receiving, or is it essentially an excise tax that they're putting on us?
There is no premium to Glendale. That charge is to all of its water agencies that take water from Metropolitan. So per acre foot, whatever Glendale takes, that's their charge, but it's also whatever Foothill takes, same charge. Whatever LA takes, it's the same charge. And it's based on cost of service. They do an analysis every 2 years to come up with those rates. There's also a couple of other charges that there are. One is a capacity charge, and that's based on peaking. So if you peak on Metropolitan, because of that peaking capacity that they have to create, there is basically a peaking charge. And then there's a readiness to serve charge based on having their pipelines and distribution system there as a charge, just in case you come on.
I understand that they have their arguments and rationale. But for instance, the readiness to serve charge, under the state constitution, a state government cannot pay somebody else for a good or service until and unless they've actually received it. Simply having pipes, not that you're using, but that somebody built out and says, it costs me money to build these out, just in case you want this in the future. The alternative is that when we come to them and they don't have the capacity, we just don't get it. I understand that. But to charge us that without an upfront, they can do an assessment. They can do a capital assessment but then there's a whole public process, and then all the stakeholders have to vote on it and agree to it. And in a sense, you agree, like a HOA charge where all the homeowners say, yes, we're going to do a capital call and we do this. But to just go ahead and let the entity go build the stuff just because it wants to do the CapEx and then charge you, we specifically found case law that prohibits this. So all I'm just trying to get at here is just, it may be worthwhile to just take a look. I don't think, I may be wrong on this, but is there like a public utility commission that adjudicates this? My sense is no. Therefore, who is challenging this? And therefore, would there be room for us? And if we even save 10%, that's a lot.
President Jasmine and Commission members, if I may chime in. Commissioner Peterson, the capacity charge that you're referring to, there is case law that defines when a provider could pass on that charge to its customers. It's the ability, readiness to serve. So in order for us to take a closer look, and you're correct, there is no Public Utilities Commission that oversees. However, as we discussed, there is a cost of service study that's put out by Metropolitan Water District, similar to what Glendale Water and Power puts out, what other cities put out. So if the city was inclined to take a closer look, it would require both legal and, of course, experts in rate setting to take a look at the COSA that Metropolitan issues every 2 years to make sure that the rates are indeed what they're supposed to be.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions?
Yes. Sorry. So 7,000 AFY is just dumped into the LA River, is that correct? Yes. And I think you said Orange County has a process where they put this into the groundwater, into the ground.
Through spreading grounds.
Right, yeah. And there's no way for us, we can do that at the Verdugo Basin? I mean, it might be costly to pump it all the way there, I'm not sure, but I'm just asking.
It would be costly to pump it up the hill, and there's no place to put a spreading basin up there, essentially. Well, we could talk to Pasadena, which we're going to do. We're always looking for new recycled water customers, always, and have plans to expand the distribution system. But
Add insult to that comment is the Grayson Power Plant is now no longer operating, so their number one customer, which is the cooling towers, are no longer in need of that reclaimed water. But Los Angeles is looking for ways to actually use that water, and it would be the output of LADWRP, and we'd be involved in that. So if it's to make it potable, then that would be what we would be doing, or if we would transfer our rights for some other rights, we are looking at those options to maximize our reclaimed water.
So one category that I don't think we've touched on yet that I think is small but could be significant is kind of gray water. So in between, and I think we have a program to incentivize people to install gray water systems from their laundry, right? Because that's a fairly simple job to do, right? And it's fairly contained, so you don't have to worry about contamination. How is that program performing? Do we get many takers?
I couldn't tell you how many. It's not administered by my section. But yeah, certainly there are people who do it. It has to be a simple system whereby it does not require a county health permit. So essentially a gravity system, and there is some rebate incentive amount
Yeah, I believe right now it's a $500 incentive. I've looked at it for my own home because the back, my laundry's on an exterior wall, so it's kind of an obvious thing, and I'm interested in doing it. I think 500 might cover my costs as a DIY project, but it's not going to cover it for me to hire somebody to do that. And as a result, it's on my to-do list and probably will be for many years. So we might want to think about if this metropolitan cost is our benchmark. Maybe we could afford to incentivize the gray water laundry program at a higher level, and it would still be cost effective and might get more takers that way.
Yeah, good point.
So currently, you said that's not part of your group, is structured under public benefits, is that?
That's correct.
Okay. So we don't really think about the results of the gray water program as part of like a water resource. We think of it more as like, and I'm trying to draw the comparison to like customer generated electricity, whereas on, customer solar, we think of as an energy resource, right? And I think that's part of the resource mix, but it seems like we're not really thinking about customer generated water as the same part of the resource mix.
So if we put the gray water in your planter bed, and hopefully you would turn off your sprinklers in their planter bed and therefore save the potable water and you would use less water. That's the concept. So we do that. And again, it has to be on the outside, on an outside wall, and on the other side of that wall needs to be a planter bed. So we do look at the efficiencies, and like you said, it's $500 and it's, I could do it, but not many people have the capability of actually doing that.
Come on over to my place and put you to work. Side hustle. No, that may be the simple ask is what is like the cost effectiveness metric of, what is the typical laundry to landscape gray water system save in terms of gallons over its life, and how does that compare to $1,200 an acre foot from Met? And maybe the break even is at $1,000 per project or $2,000 per project, and we get more of them done, and it would still be a good use of public funds. So if you can investigate that and work with the.
You make a good point in that the calculation I could do. The downside is you'd have to make some assumptions. Are people going to turn off their sprinklers? How much water they use. So there's some variables, but it's a worthwhile exercise, yeah.
But I think, sorry, Mark, I think at the end of the day, I think personal responsibility should kick in a little bit, and not try to do it only if we can get $500 from the city. If you want to do good, do good. Don't worry about the money. I mean, if you can afford it, obviously. If you can't afford it, I understand. But to a certain sense, if you can make the math of calculating all that $1,200 per CFA and all that stuff, probably you're making good money. So don't worry about it. You should be able to do it.
That's a great point, because our public benefits has a certain amount of money, and we look for programs that will have a positive effect on as many people as possible. So we have low income, we have these various programs, and I think on next week at council we'll be talking about them. There's quite a few programs, so we take that money and divide it into the programs so that as many people can get the benefit as possible. So if we were to increase the cost of gray water, we'd be taking it from a different program.
Unless we're just not really using the whole gray water allocation. If we've allocated $1 million to do gray water subsidies, but because the subsidy amount is not high enough for anyone to pursue it, is that money being left unspent potentially? And maybe be better to spend $1 million to help 100 people than to spend $0 and help 0 people.
Sure, I get the idea, but any type of money that's saved in public benefits goes to a different public benefit.
I see. Okay. Well, it'd be good to get the numbers and we can look at it. So. And then I heard anecdotally that Pasadena has a more generous program for their laundry to landscape incentive, that they'll cover the full cost or they'll send someone out to do it. That might be another thing we could consider. I don't know if that's the case, but I know like for the home energy audits and certain retrofits, we will send a contractor out paid by GWP to perform the work. We might look at that as another program model for laundry to landscape, that if a customer meets certain criteria, you say, okay, call us, get in the queue, we'll send a contractor out to do the work for you. And that might be another way to get more of those done, right?
Right, certainly. Anything to get it off your to-do list.
Yeah, I just don't want to deal with it, right? No, but I think the idea is if we determine as a utility that that is an effective thing we want our customers to be doing, then let's go get it done. Let's make it happen, right? And I think similarly on the Purple Pipe network, I'm curious, how do we go about marketing or selling that service to potential customers who are located along the pipe right away or might be new anchor customers? Do we have like an in-house salesperson who's out banging on doors, or how do we talk to customers or potential customers about that?
There's no salesperson. It's the large customers become obvious, and anyone along that alignment essentially becomes obvious. It's me, our staff, that are looking and, using intuition to track down possible customers.
So we're just kind of looking at usage history from customers who are within some buffer distance of the pipe route?
Yeah.
And how does that conversation usually go if you approach them and say, hey,
It varies a lot. I mean, some people don't want to be bothered. Others, when you spell out the savings, they're very interested. On-site retrofit cost is a big challenge. Who's going to pay for it? How much will it cost? And that at the beginning is typically an unknown. So,
do we ever cover those costs, or are those
Yeah.
on that side of the customer's meter, we say that's your
we
responsibility?
have covered them, or a portion of them, yes.
Uh-huh.
It's-
Okay, I think it's really interesting. I mean, we have this network, this existing network, so anything we could do to get more mileage out of that existing network would seem to be an easy win, right? And then the potential of extending the network with new trunk lines, also seems like a good one. So, and that might be something as we're thinking about the budget and positions, if we think we could get more takers by having more focused effort, or maybe a dedicated staff person, or hire a consultant to like go out and shake the trees or something, might be worth looking at.
This is highly unlike me to ask my staff a question, but I've been asked numerous times that it's been raining a lot lately. Why do we still have a drought? So if you can explain the difference between our water supply from Northern California and Lake Mead, and the reason why we still have to conserve water because of the Lake Mead issue, that would be great, because there are a lot of people are very concerned with why we still are in a drought condition.
Well, we kind of touched on this at the last meeting, but, a couple of things. One conclusion, especially taking the direction of California legislation, which is entitled Conservation as a California Way of Life, I think we should always be thinking in terms of conserving. The State Water Project, yes, is flush with water after this winter. Colorado is not. Colorado is not, not in good shape. There are projections where it'll, within the next few years, drop to the dead pool level, which means hydroelectricity won't be able to be produced anymore. My thought in the last meeting was we should continue to do anything we can, or strike the balance between going to phase one, unrestricted watering, and phase, well, we used to be 1 day a week, we went to 2 days. I'm suggesting going to 2 days a week, but not go to, we had 2 days a week, go to 3 days a week, but not go to unrestricted watering. That was kind of striking the balance in my mind. Feedback from ratepayers has been sporadic. As we heat up during the summer, we may get more feedback. I was, in my mind, waiting to see how that shakes out.
Thank you.
I had a question about the, I believe on your map, there was a projected line that's going up to Chevy Chase Golf Course.
Yes.
What are they using now? Are they using potable water?
Yes.
How much does a golf course use?
The estimation on the map is 100 acre-feet per year for that golf course, which,
Could you dumb that down for me as, I mean, how many gallons?
well, an acre-foot is 325,000 gallons, so that's 31 million gallons per year.
Getting clearer, right, Commissioner Lara? I think maybe in terms of how many households, I mean, a acre foot serves what, 2 households for a year, something like that?
Acre-foot, one household. Typically, that's a lot of water, but yeah, one household. So 100 households.
Okay. Thank you for that. Also, I believe it was Agora or Calabasas in the last year approved a large water reclamation project. Was that DPR? It was like 325 million or something. I mean, it was a lot of money. And basically, the water was running, down to Malibu to the ocean or whatever, and I guess you're not familiar with that project, but anyway.
I'd be surprised if it was DPR. Regulations are still in flux, and yeah, LA is kind of at the forefront of that. I haven't heard of any other agencies doing that.
Thank you.
How about taking the pipes up to Duke-Majan? Is that too high a lift to irrigate the park there? Or
The well map. I don't know. A cost analysis would have to be done. I've never heard that as a suggestion before.
okay.
It could, it would depend on the size and the amount needed and so on.
Okay. And then what about, let's say you're going up Chevy Chase, the houses there, couldn't you do dual plumbing and start irrigating lawns with recycled water? Is that an option?
How feasible is it to provide recycled water to residential? And essentially, I don't have the numbers, but the small amount you would save or that they would use versus the cost of on-site retrofit, I don't think makes it feasible.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, any other question on this before we move on?
Just to respond to Commissioner Kadikian's point, I think that if the water rates were aggressively tiered enough, we wouldn't have to provide any incentives for people to do gray water reuse or other things, because they would have their own internal incentive, and people can do the math in their family budget and figure out, how much is it worth it for me to water this section of my lawn? And that's something we can think about in this whole mix, is in the same way that we find that new things are cost effective because it's so expensive to buy water from Metropolitan. I think our customers might find the same thing if they're tier 3, tier 4, maybe there's a tier 5, for water use that is well above and beyond, basic needs. It's really just extravagance at that point. That water ought to be very expensive, right? Is there a limit on how much we can charge customers for the highest peak of water use? Is it limited to what we pay Metropolitan, or how do we figure that out?
President Jasmine, Commission members, Commissioner Fay, there are different factors that they go into the cost of service analysis. One of the factors is Metropolitan Water District. One of the factors is how much it costs us to deliver the water at peak periods, electricity charge, if it costs more to pump during the summer months, during the time that everybody's using water at the same time. So the short answer to your question is yes, there are specific requirements. We can't just make it, you can have conservation in mind to incentivize people to conserve water, but it can't be punitive. There has to be some kind of correlation relationship.
Great. And I think the fact that we have a current tiered structure indicates there is some legal basis for doing it that way, and that we recognize everyone has a basic right to a certain amount of water for their personal use, but maybe having a lawn or swimming pool is a luxury that not everybody gets for free or for cheap, right? So.
That's correct, keeping in mind that the individuals or the property owners that have the pool, they're also entitled to be able to fill that pool. So you're absolutely correct. There has to be a relationship. It can't be punitive, but the points that you made are valid, of course.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, why don't we move on then to the next item?
Item 4C, budget presentation.
I'd like to introduce Dave Davis. He's the Utility Finance Manager. He'll be making the presentation this evening, rather.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dave Davis, Finance Manager for the utility. I'd like to start off today talking about our authorized headcount. Last year, we had 360 authorized positions, or actually 324 full-time positions and 35.4 hourly. For the coming fiscal year, we increased our full-time 2 positions. We got approval to hire 2 electrical planners. We had a backlog on that. And then on the hourlies, we increased 14 positions. And the reason we got permission to increase 14 hourlies is our vacancies. We have a total of 54 vacancies in the electric utility and 18 in the water utility. Total is 73 vacancies for water and power. Moving right along, we'll go over each one of our funds. The first one is the Public Benefit Fund. We got a $1.3 million increase in the Public Benefit Fund. This is because of our Public Benefit Department increased a number of programs this year. That's a good increase there. The next fund, the Fiber Optic Fund, this is an O&M fund for our fiber optics. The capital improvements are in the electric fund. This fiber optic fund, just a slight increase. This fund has our engineer in charge of the fiber and contracts. That's just a small increase there. The Electric Revenue Fund, this is the electric O&M fund. This includes operations and maintenance down at Grayson Power Plant and the electric distribution system. Includes most of our employees. And that's a $27 million increase. And approximately half of that is due to increase in purchase power and natural gas. We also have slight increases in salaries and benefits, contractual services. We had a lot of inflation adjustments in a lot of our contracts, and increase in the transfer and some cost allocations from the city that increased substantially. Our next fund is the electric depreciation fund. This is our capital projects. Includes the capital being down at Grayson Power Plant, the repowering. Also includes all the transmission and distribution improvements to the electric system. And increased about $3.9 million. That's not a very large increase for our capital. And then we got 2 smaller funds, two small customer paid funds, electric. We throw money in that every year for customers to come in and want things done, permits, stuff like that. So those are customer paid funds. And then our next fund is the Waterworks Revenue Fund. This is the Water O&M Fund. And this includes the operation and maintenance, most of our salaries, and increased $3.9 million. And most of that is the increase in purchased water. We also have increases in utilities, contractual services, salaries and benefits. But the majority of that is between contractual and purchased water. Next fund is the Water Depreciation Fund. And this is a water CIP fund. Includes all our capital projects. There was only a slight increase of $24,000. And we have some slides later on some specific projects on water and electric. And then we also have, again, customer paid projects or customer paid funds on the water side also. And if you don't have any questions, we have some slides on some specific projects on the electric side. I'll bring Dan Scores up. He has all the details on these projects.
The commission members, just real quick, on the first project, we have the fleet electrification study. That's the initial study to see what it takes to provide the service to the city to do fleet electrification. That's public works, it's police, fire. So this study will look at the details required for them to receive that power. It's something that the city departments will have to pay. And our study portion of it is $200,000. Next one. This is the solar project that we have an RFP out now. So it was in our budget. This is the 7 sites that we're developing. It says battery development. The battery development is described in the what value will it bring. There we're going to be using the 7 sites to charge up the batteries at Grayson. Next one is the 4 to 12 kV conversion. So we have 2 distribution voltages in Glendale, 4 and 12 kV. 12 kV can carry 3 times the amount of power that 4 kV can. We're doing about, this is the contractor portion, we're doing 4 conversions, 4 feeders per year. It's about $7 million. So this shows 1 year's worth of conversion by a contractor. We're also trying to do some in-house. When crews have available time, they'll be doing the conversion internally, and that'll be about 5 feeders per year to convert. I think next one, pipeline management, probably Richard knows this one better, but it's described down there if we can go through it. So, do you want to?
Richard.
Our pipeline management program is an ongoing program. We're putting in new pipes each year, every year, to the tune of about $10 million a year. We've had a master plan, last done in 2016. It's done every 5 years. We're currently doing the next one. And of course, the reason for replacing pipes is they have a limited lifespan. And many of our pipes are 80 to 100 years old. The old cast iron pipes are experiencing more and more breaks. Many of them are small diameter, 6 inch, sometimes even 4 inch. We're upsizing all of those to 8 inch with ductile iron pipe. This increases our fire flow capacity, increases the pressure in the system, and improves the water quality in the system. We have also an ongoing program of water reservoir and tank inspection and rehabilitation. Our tanks are inspected every 5 years and then prioritized based on the results of that inspection as far as the need for rehabilitation. Typically, rehabilitation includes recoating, sandblasting and recoating the interior and sometimes the exterior. That increases the useful life of the tanks. We typically add spiral staircases on the exterior of the tank, eliminating the old straight up ladder, the vertical ladder that has certain level of hazards to it. And it's paid through the water depreciation fund. That's it.
One thing I forgot to mention, July 1st, we have a 1% average increase, rate increase on the electric side, and 2% on the water side, effective July 1st.
I had a question about that. How long do the new pipes last?
That's why I also would have
Sorry.
Ductile iron will also have a lifespan of, 80 to 100 years.
So they're essentially the same pipes that we're pulling out, except we're putting larger ones in?
Correct, larger diameter. Ductile is considered a better material, less prone to breakage, certainly less brittle. It's a newer material.
Okay. Thank you.
On our handout, there's this public benefit slides. I'm not sure if we're going to discuss those.
Good evening, Scott Nolan, AGM Power Management. I haven't really prepared anything for discussion, but if you have some questions, I'll endeavor to answer them.
Oh, that's fine. No, I mean, I just saw them. I thought there was a presentation on them.
It was.
Yeah.
I think there was some.
Our apologies. We use this for city council, and I think that we did talk about public benefits a month or two ago. So we didn't feel a need to actually go through it again.
Okay. Any,
I just had one question. I believe that somebody said that there were new programs, new public benefits programs added, so the dollar amount went up.
Yes.
And I thought that, I assumed that our revenue for the public benefits programs were just based on the charges from the utility bills. I mean,
That's correct. It's 3.6% of the electric and water is how we get the PBC revenue.
okay.
If I may, the amount of money that you spend on these programs are not a science. So we're anticipating certain costs associated with these programs. So there is a little bit of buffer so that we don't want to stop the program if it's being successful. So there is some monies that are set aside, or we'll take some monies from less engaging programs and put it into the more engaging programs so that we can keep the programs alive.
Okay, that makes sense.
I have some questions with regards to the presentation. So the slide number 2, the personnel, the proposed for fiscal year 23-24, number of full-time, hourly FTEs and such, and the increase over there. So how was this determined this is what we need? I mean, usually I would say this is what is the minimum I would like, this is the maximum I could handle. Because we're asking more and more from GWP. We're asking electrification of the fleet and all. and all the associated infrastructure for that. And the number of additions of full-time employees is just 2. And I'm wondering how you're going to be able to meet all that we are asking with just 2 more employees. And is there constraints that being put on GWP, or you're asking the minimum, or your hope and dreams? How are we coming to these numbers?
So I think, I do believe that if you asked every department, they would say they would need more people. So I think that city manager's office and the city as a whole would have to manage total employees for the city. The 2 additional is because our lead time for ADUs and solar installations are taking a lot longer, and we've lost a lot of planners. So we've asked for 2 permanent employee increases. They've not been approved yet. On June 13th, council will see the budget and hopefully approve the budget, and at that time, then all the additional employees would be approved or not approved based on their decision. What we're looking for is, moving forward, if there's programs that we're getting involved in that needs additional staffing, we will include that staffing in the council reports so that if they approve the program that we're getting involved in, they would have to include the additional FTEs.
My comment is, I don't think this is enough, is based on what we're asking. And I think it would be beneficial to us or council saying, this is what we need to maintain. If you want me to rebuild the infrastructure so that we can power up all these cars, then I need this much more. Instead of waiting for a project to come, be involved, and then saying, okay, well, we need the money and we need the resources, we need the personnel. The requests are there. Seems the interest is there from the public to electrify and such. So this is the time to ask for more, saying, if you want me to do all this, I need these people right now. Not let some project come and then we'll figure out what we need. Because time is of the essence and the interest is here. And I would say strike while the iron is hot. So ask for it. Don't limit yourself. That's my comment on that. With regards to the vacancies here, 54 in electrical and 18 in water, what's the holdup? Are we not paying enough?
Again, and I believe anybody that works for the city, if you ask them if they got paid enough, they would probably say, no, we're underpaid. But comparative market analysis, they're doing a comparative market analysis on many positions, and they're going to be adjusted. That's over my pay grade right now. But what's happening is there's a big move towards other utilities, just like we've lost a lot of linemen to private industry. Los Angeles is looking at hiring many people from the smaller utilities. So yes, I think that pay is an issue, but we're doing the best that we can to train and keep our employees. And I think that's an issue throughout the whole industry.
Could I just interject maybe, or with a question that may help clarify is, how much of the GWP workforce is members of a bargaining unit?
All of them.
Yes, so that's one of the key things is that to be able to adjust, the immediate pay, you typically have to adjust an entire pay scale that has extrapolations into the future on step and column elements that will be going in. And so typically that is subject to an entire set of negotiations and bargaining. So in the public sector, you oftentimes struggle with lagging behind private sector, especially in a tight labor market situation where it's very difficult to become very responsive. And if you try to expand the workforce using temporaries, oftentimes you end up with prohibitions under existing labor contracts that prohibit you from. I'm probably telling you nothing you already don't know, but it's just a fact for some of our listeners that it's just hard to sometimes make the elephant dance.
But sometimes I also see what's happening is artificially limiting or the entry into these fields to keep demand high, therefore salaries high and what have you. So anyways, it's just, again, there's a need, and I don't think we should slow down. I'm not saying just throw money at things, but we got to look at alternatives, whether contracting outside, getting RFPs or something to get things done. That's all.
And I'm sorry, you know, I kind of lost my train of thought there. It's pretty typical that we have a certain amount of vacancies in the utility because there is turnover. We have a strict policy where we're trying to hire all the vacant positions, but as soon as you hire the vacant positions, other people retire or move on, and those positions then are promotional positions, and then you have to backfill. So process is a little bit difficult. It's something that we're struggling with to get filled as soon as possible. But I don't think it's unique in just the utility. I think it's in all the departments that it's happening. So HR, or human resources, is bombed with just trying to fill vacant positions. So we're trying to methodically figure out the highest priority positions and hire them first. And not that the lowest priority positions don't get hired, but we don't want to tax HR so badly that we don't get anything. So we have to manage the requests at that stage in order for us to fill. And we got hurt really bad when the AGMs left, and we had some other high-level people that are retired. My thought process is to hire them so that they can hire their subordinates, and then there's some loyalty there, and they could fill out their workforce the way they need to. So we're still trying to manage that.
Any other questions?
Sorry, one more question. On the fiber optic fund of 253,000 to 331,000, is it worth it for us to be in this particular thing? Isn't our resources used better in electricity or water and leave data transmission to AT&T or T-Mobile or anybody else? Is it worth it? It's still handling fiber optics is the question.
I think it's very worth it. I think it's a great positive income stream for the city. Oh yes, there's a big move for utilities because it is a utility to start managing it. We're in the process right now of creating the fiber optic backbone, and that's going to go to supporting, again, anchor customers, and then hopefully we'll be able to expand that and to provide fiber and dark fiber and things like that to commercial and industrial customers, and eventually be able to provide services to, say, schools, city properties, large industries, and that's a growing trend, and it shows promise. It just takes a little bit of work because we have to put the fiber on the power poles, and we have to be able to get the infrastructure in place in order for us to then go out to obtain customers. So there's going to be a big push to expand our fiber optic in the next year or so, and we're going to start looking for large-scale customers and then bring that down. Ideally, we'd like to make sure that we have capability of providing internet services and things like that at the parks. So I think it's going to be a good thing for the city. It's in its infant stage right now. We have one person. We're going to expand that to 3 or 4 people, and then we're going to start to market it and try to make it what it needs to be. Pasadena, I know Burbank does it, and the other utilities are doing it, but in the whole country, there are a lot of utilities that are working in the fiber business.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fay?
Yeah. Mr. Davis, you mentioned a couple terms in passing that I wanted to make sure I understood and that we all understood the implications of. So you said cost allocations from the city and increasing the transfer. Can you explain what you mean by those?
Yes, we get allocated annually for costs, for city council, city manager, HR department, legal department. And so at the beginning of the year, the city's finance department, does their analysis based on, how much we use them, and they allocate certain percentages across all the city departments. And our allocations have been increasing. And then for the transfer,
Are those, so that's essentially overhead or shared services that support department operations, but we don't have our own in-house HR department, for example. We use the city's
that's correct.
HR department, right?
Yeah, fleet, ISD, all the support departments.
And those allocations, are they generally in line with headcount or with inflation increases, or what's the process by which that number?
Yeah, I don't know what criteria they use. I knew like for accounts payable, they count the invoices.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes for council, they'll use how many council reports we come. But that may change.
So there's some nexus in terms of how much, our department is using these citywide services.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the transfer?
Transfer in the past has been 10% of operating revenues. There's been talk at the last meeting we had, they're going to raise it to 13%. But as our revenue increases, so does the transfer. So that's why that number went up, is because our revenue is increasing.
And is this transfer, is this just like some arbitrary accounting tactic, or what's the basis for this transfer?
It's in the charter, and the city's always had it. And right now, the percentage, like I said, is 10% of operating revenues. So they're going to take that, regardless.
And this is, because we're a public utility, this is in lieu of a tax that a private utility would pay to its local host city, right?
Yeah, like a franchise tax.
Right. So it's kind of equivalent to what Edison would pay to its host cities that it operates in, or other utilities, right?
That's correct.
And this is pretty standard. Other municipal utilities pay this kind of transfer to the main city general fund on a regular basis?
Some do, some don't. I know LA does, and I'm not sure about Burbank or Pasadena.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the budget? Okay, why don't we move on to the next item?
You want to
Item 4D, summer readiness, high heat events.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Chief Valdez, the Integrated Resource Planning Administrator. She'll present.
Yes, good evening, President Jasmine and members of the Commission. Chief Valdez, Integrated Resource Planning Administrator for Glendale Water and Power. So I'll go over our 2023 Summer Energy Assessment. Okay, so this map represents the current forecasted temperature probabilities for the months of July, August, and September of this year as provided by the National Weather Service. It's an entity of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or what we call NOAA. And as you may all know, load and demand is actually a function of temperature. So in Southern California, our highest loads commonly occur in the summer months and are almost exclusively driven by air conditioning systems. And as what Commissioner Fay has indicated, we're going to expect a warmer summer this year. So based on this chart right here. So it's saying that we do have a 40 to 50% chance that we will experience above normal temperature. So you might ask, what is normal, right? So for the city of Glendale, the months of July through September, the normal average based on the daily peak since 2000 is in the low 80s. It is important to know, though, that this is an average over 3 months, and it doesn't predict the extreme heat events, just like what we experienced last year. One other consistent theme that we've been hearing from the weather forecasters, which is not obvious in this information, is that the extremes we experience will likely be more extreme. And the extremes are what we, as electric utility, must plan for. So for this summer energy assessment, we're using the September 6, 2022 peak load as our base case. So this is when California experienced a record-breaking 10-day heat wave with CAISO demand exceeding the all-time high peak. And then the entire state of California scrambled for energy, triggering unprecedented energy emergency calls. Maybe it's still fresh in your mind that happened last year. So this chart is our resource stack. Comparing our load and resource balance in 2022, when we hit our peak for that year at 331 megawatts, with the planned resources for 2023. Note though that the 331 is not our all-time peak. Our all-time peak is 346. But for planning purposes for this year, we're planning on that 331. As if, like if that situation happens again, this would be our situation right here. So last year, our share of Magnolia PDCI transmission line, as well as the Southwest transmission line, are at full capacity. So it provided us sufficient energy to cover our load during the high heat events. Plus, we had some surplus that we delivered to the CAISO in response to their emergency calls. So as we get through the Grayson Repowering project, meeting our load will be a real challenge this year and for the next 3 years. So the bar on the right here is our resource stack for September, showing that we only have 280 megawatts of available firm capacity. We were looking to replace at least 75 megawatts of local energy. However, we were only able to secure 25 megawatts from LADWP. So based on the 331 megawatt base case, it shows that we have a 51 megawatt shortfall, energy shortfall for the summer. And that is on the assumption that Grayson 9, Magnolia, and our import capability are at full capacity. Normally, increases in ambient air temperatures decreases transmission carrying capacity and reduces the amount of energy production from generation facilities. Okay, so power management is committed to maintain system reliability and minimize, if not eliminate, the probability of having to show load this summer due to high demand. So to mitigate our shortfall, we will be transacting in day-ahead and real-time market. So this includes exporting from CAISO at Silmar, although this is a non-firm product, meaning it could get cut. We could also buy energy from Burbank to be delivered at Western, or additional, probably some energy from LA delivered at Airway. So to address the price spikes, we have locked in term power and gas deals. Currently, we're hedged up to 90% of our average load. And to reduce the possibility of CAISO exports being curtailed, we're also looking into buying this new product, which is called the non-RA capacity, backing high priority CAISO exports. So exports backed by capacity designated to serve external load from the CAISO have a higher priority than the usual exports. So this gives us the same priority as if that specific load is in the CAISO. However, this is a very expensive product and we're still looking for, it's very illiquid, but we're still looking and hopefully we could find something to bridge some of the gap right there. Okay, so to highlight some of the challenges that we are dealing with when it comes to power supply, first here is the Eland project, the Eland COD, that 25 megawatts of Eland Solar plus BESS was supposed to come online early this year. However, the detainment of the modules or the panels by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has caused significant delay in the project. To the project. So the new anticipated operation date is late summer of 2024. So, would still be a little short right there. We were expecting that 25 megawatts to come online, if not this year, hopefully, early next year. But now, because of these delays, we're still looking, we're looking at late summer of 24. So our power supply during the Grayson Repowering project implementation has substantially reduced our local capacity down to about 40 to 45 megawatts. So except for Unit 9, all units have already been separated and are no longer available as of last month. So there's no way for us to kind of like fall back if, you know, like if there is something. Currently, we're looking at, like I've mentioned, 3 summers with energy shortfalls. The coal supply shortage has been disrupting the production of, from Intermountain Power. So IPP provides us a reliable source of energy 24/7. However, due to the low inventory of coal supply, we're forced to shut down one of the 2 units. That consequently reduces our STS capacity. But we're just trying to save all this coal so that we could have something, you know, like at full capacity by the time we hit summer. So both of our
Excuse me,
Whitegrass
can I
and
just-
Star Peak projects.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
just to clarify, you used the term SDS. Can you?
That's the Southern Transmission System.
Just to clarify, the STS is a DC line that goes from Delta, Utah to Adelanto. It's what we use to bring in the IPP energy. It's like I said, it's a 500-volt DC line, and this is what we're going to use for the renewable hub that's up at IPP when we repower IPP.
Thank you. So for our geothermal projects, both the Whitegrass and Star Peak projects, they're not performing as expected due to some technical issues. Recently, or currently, we are working it out with the developer, and they've indicated that they want to lower the estimated and guaranteed generation from the facility by up to 30% going forward. So that impacts not only our firm energy, but Glendale's renewable position as well. Okay, as Mark indicated earlier, there's a lot of rain yet, you know, like we're still sort of like in a drought situation. We might have a lot of rain this year, but Lake Mead and Hoover Dam water level is still at historic low, and that results to limited energy output. Note that Hoover is our least expensive resource. So meaning replacing the deficit in generation from the facility means increased purchase power costs. So as I mentioned earlier, so the CAISO tariff allows curtailments of exports. The exports have lower scheduling priority than CAISO load, meaning if there is insufficient supply, this will be the first to get curtailed. The 25 megawatts energy that we purchased from LA has a provision that it can be cut for any operational reason, on the spot for any system disruption. The only time that they can curtail it is if it's based on, you know, like if they found a better price. We also have here the $1,000 WEC imposed soft cap that is impacting the liquidity in the market, especially at the node trading hub last year. Some of the energy providers were not offering power, especially during the high demand situation, for fear of violating a rule that would require justification and refunds. This is a consequence of FERC's decision ordering some of the entities to refund the premiums they earned from sales into CAISO during the severe heat wave of August in 2020. So they got fined not fined, you know, like the decision back in 21 for this event was that they have to justify and refund the buyers. And last year, I think they, you know, what they did is that instead of getting into this situation, they'd rather, you know, like not sell. So what happened is that even if we do have the transmission available to us, the Pacific DC, there's nothing that we could buy from there because the marketers or the energy providers were holding on to their energy. And last but not the least is transmission and generation outage. So as you've seen in our resource stack, we're already 51 megawatts short. So any significant reduction in the Pacific DC line, transmission line, the Southwest AC, Grayson or Magnolia will potentially force us to shed load if our balancing authority cannot cover our shortfall. And that concludes our presentation for summer assessment, and we're here for your questions.
Okay, does anyone have questions on this side? No? No, Director Fay?
Sounds like we might have some blackouts this summer. What do you think?
We're doing our best to avoid that situation.
It's a very diplomatic answer. I know that things move slowly in the utility world, and so we're probably stuck with the situation that will, whatever's in place now is the situation that will be in place come August, September. So there's probably not a whole lot of action we can take. But this looks pretty bad. I mean, how do we prepare the people who live in Glendale that, they might have some interruption in their electricity during a heat wave in August? Or do we feel confident that we can pay a high enough price to buy the energy we need in the open market so that doesn't happen?
Do we feel confident? Well, I think just because there's a 40 to 50% chance that the temperatures might be higher this summer, I don't know if that tells the real story. The real story is not how high the temperature is, but how low the nighttime temperature is. So as a trader and as somebody that was the integrated resource planner, I didn't pay too much attention to 100, 105 degrees if the temperature in nighttime went down to 70 or 75 degrees, because people would start to turn their air conditioners off and things wouldn't stay hot. It's only when the temperature stays up at 80, 85 degrees in the middle of the night that we start worrying about that. We don't see that very often. So we're not anticipating these huge temperature swings where we're going to experience that. That being said, I believe that we can still do more. I pushed very, very hard to get the repower done before this critical moment. And unfortunately, this is the manifestation of having to wait so long for the repower. Why do I say that? Because everybody is taking fossil fuel energy offline and making it unavailable. So there's bigger pricing swings and there's less available energy. So we're doing the best that we can to do this, but this is going to be better now than next year, and that'd be better than the year after. So we have to go through this process. We've been working diligently with our balancing authority, both Burbank and Los Angeles, to work with us to make sure that we don't go into an emergency. If we find ourselves in emergency, we'll declare a state of emergency, and Los Angeles would be almost obligated to help us. But when we do that, there's other things that turn on, like then you would have to answer to higher authorities as to why that's happening. We would like not for that to happen, but for instance, this 25 megawatts that we purchased from Los Angeles, that's contingent on their not going into blackouts. But if they were going into blackouts, we would be going into blackouts too. I think there's a difference between the Los Angeles Balancing Authority and the CAISO. The CAISO can go into blackouts. Los Angeles Balancing Authority doesn't do that, and I have a good feeling that we'll be able to manage that. We could have distribution blackouts, rolling blackouts. We had that a couple of years ago where we had a freak accident at the Ross Point substation, and then we had an overload of a distribution line that caused rolling blackouts for a weekend. But that's a different story. When we're talking about resource assessment, we're not talking about the problems inside the distribution system.
Right, we're thinking the big picture here,
Yes.
right? So the fact that 25 megawatts from LA is contingent, that makes me a little nervous, because when we all have the same weather, right? They're just a mile away. So if it's really hot here, it's really hot there. And if they can pull that energy back because they need it, So what is our forecast for LA's situation and Burbank's situation for the coming summer? Because it seems like those are the two neighbors we're somewhat dependent on. are they in a position to lend us the cup of sugar we may need?
Our situation is different from theirs, right? You know, that because we don't have enough local resources. So before we get to that issue, that let's say, you know, like if it's a high heat event, if they're in a bad situation, we're in the worst situation, right? So, but when we get to a situation, let's say that we need energy, and they have that one, they actually committed verbally, of course, you know, like to us, that they're willing to help us out. Only in the situation I think we're in, all of us, let's say the whole California, you know, like that situation that happened back in September, it is really bad. I mean, like there's nothing that we could get from them.
And at a certain point, you know, if it's a statewide issue, it's a statewide issue, right? We're all going to be subject to that. I think the thing that we want to avoid as people who are tasked with managing the utility for this city is we don't want to be in a position where Glendale goes dark, but Burbank still has the lights on and LA still has the lights on, right? That would show that, you know, we're in a bad position.
If I may, I think what we're showing you is energy. There's also capacity, which a lot of people call reserves. Los Angeles always will keep reserves. That's their requirement. If they have to go black to maintain their reserves or go into rolling blackouts, they'll maintain their reserves. If they don't, then they'd have to answer to NERC. So if the balancing authority was in trouble and we couldn't supply our energy, we declared emergency. That emergency would allow Los Angeles to provide us with reserves that they were holding back to keep our lights on. Then we would have to answer to WAC and NERC as to why we put the grid in that position. So I think that could happen. But as far as Los Angeles ready to go black and we're gonna go black and Los Angeles and Glendale and Burbank are gonna sit pretty, that won't happen.
And that emergency declaration goes beyond the 25 megawatt contingent commitment we already have? Sure. But yeah, I think if it takes us going hat in hand to the authorities and explaining why we put the grid in a compromising position, we need to be prepared to do that, right? So I'm glad that is something that we consider on the table. And last, you mentioned a figure earlier, $1,500, what we paid per megawatt hour last summer during the peak?
I'm not sure.
Something
That's
like,
correct.
That's correct, right?
Yes.
is we expecting a similar peak or higher this summer, or what do we think the
Every year we hit a similar, you
new
know,
peak?
like, yeah. So we're seeing, if let's say, you know, like there would be shortage again in California for energy, then we will be seeing those prices again.
So similar to the line of thinking around the high alternative cost of Metropolitan Water District for that water, and that creates opportunities for us here. Seems like if in those peak periods we're paying $1,500 or more a megawatt hour on the open market, then the value that we might offer our customers to turn down their thermostats is higher than, you know, right now it's just a flat $50 a year incentive, right? So I would like us to do the math and say, what is it worth for one household to turn off their thermostat during that peak event, you know, and do we have the ability to modify that program and say, for the next 4 hours, if you turn off your thermostat, we're actually going to give you $20 just for today. You know, is that a fair value exchange compared to what our alternative would be?
Yeah, so okay.
The concept is understood. However, I can't rely on whether a customer decides to do that or not decides to do that. You would have to be able to create a structure where if I press a button on my control panel, I turn 20 megawatts of people's air conditioning off. That's the only way that you could actually utilize that service. Otherwise, we already have DER programs where we call an event and we ask people to turn their air conditioning off. First day, you might get people to do it. By the fourth day, it's a hell no. And that, therefore, you can't rely on that. So it makes it very difficult. But we are trying to put ourselves in a position, both technologically and resource-wise, to be able to do certain things. And I think electrification of vehicles are the perfect example, right? So we would ramp down battery, EV chargers, or prevent Public Works from charging the B line when it becomes electrified. Those are the type of things that we're looking to do, but we're looking at what's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 years, not what's happening this summer.
So I think that that's all great, and I agree those are things we should consider as resources, and the difference between what we're asking our customers to do to contribute versus what we're paying them to do is the difference. And I think if we do the math and figure out what is it worth for one household to turn off their air conditioner for 4 hours, let's just see what that number comes out to and see how that compares with what we're currently offering in terms of incentives or deals or whatever. Because I think that it's probably a lot of money. Certainly more than the $50 a year that we're currently paying people for their smart thermostat program. So.
It's also a very gray area as to how many kilowatts you're actually saving. So we're guessing how many kilowatts people save by turning their so-called air conditioning off. And, you know, the alternative is that they go black. So it might be to their benefit to turn their air conditioners off when we send out a warning saying it's imminent.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think if we can do the numbers on that and just kind of see, so we have some basis for it, because clearly we're going to be in this position again next summer too. I think until Grayson's back online and until Shoal Canyon's producing, we're going to be in a similar situation, right? We're just kind of stuck crossing midstream.
You are right. I think what's going to happen is Shoal Canyon will come online, and that'll be 12 megawatts flat. We're hoping to get an initial phase of partial batteries, utility scale batteries in place before the final completion of the repower. So I think things get better as a year or two passes, but you are correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, why don't we move on? Next item.
Item number 5, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report. President Jesmedarian, we have no phone calls or in-person discussions.
Okay, great. So why don't we move on then to the next item, the agenda forecast.
Item number 6, agenda forecast.
Mark, do you want to start the discussion?
Yes, thank you. It looks like we're in July already. So July 3rd is our next meeting. That'll be canceled because of the holiday, and the meeting after that will be August 7th. We will be looking to present to you the Water Division Consumer Confidence Report, the Renewable Portfolio Update, Customer Data and Engagement, and the Wildfire Mitigation Update.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any comments on the agenda forecast? Anything you'd like to see added? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item,
Item number 7, adjournment.
okay, what I would like to do is I do have some sad news. The Glendale Water and Power family is saddened by the unexpected passing of Chad Edgington, Principal Power System Operator. Chad passed away on Sunday, May 7th, 2023. Chad had over 32 years of commendable experience or service with Glendale Water and Power. He was committed to providing the highest quality of service for the city and Glendale community. Chad held many roles during his time with the city of Glendale, including maintenance worker, electrical mechanic apprentice, engineering technician, senior electrical system dispatcher, and most recently as the principal power system operator in charge of Glendale Water and Power's dispatch operation. Chad is survived by his wife and his children. Condolences to the Glendale family and to Chad's family. So I ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.